Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Trail Talk. I am so glad you could join us today. I'm very excited to have a special guest here. Of course, she's not actually here, but you can see her. Her name is Anna Davis, and she is the historical interpreter at the Pawnee Bill Ranch and Museum. Is that the right order?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, the Pawnee Bill Ranch and Museum, which is near Pawnee, Oklahoma, pretty close to Stillwater, if you look it up on the map. And I cannot wait for you guys to hear all of the history associated with that and everything. But before we get into that, Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you find your way to the Pawnee Bill Ranch and Museum? And I believe you told me you've been there for 16 years.
Yeah, I'm starting my 16th year with our agency. So yeah, I've been here a while.
Yeah, like your whole career, right?
Yes, yeah, I started here when I was a junior in college. My family has roots here in Pawnee, so I've always known about the Pawneeville Ranch. I think my parents took me here when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So, it's always been a place where, we came and we toured. And when I was in college at OSU, I thought I was going to study European history of all things. And so I had studied abroad, and that got to be pretty expensive. And so I thought, oh, I need a job when I got back from overseas. And this was the nearest facility to me that was hiring. And so I was hired as the part-time worker at that time, and I just didn't leave after that. So I've stuck around for 16 years. I have my undergraduate now from Oklahoma State, and now I recently actually graduated during the pandemic with my master's degree in museum studies from OU. So I think it's just safe to say that I'm going to stick around for another 16 years or so.
Like you have any plans of going anywhere? So
probably not, no.
Was like museum work kind of always your real interest in studying history?
I think so. I started when I was really young with genealogy and things like that. So research has always really interested me. So when I became the site, historian, for lack of a better term, it really kind of suited my, strengths as a person. So being a historian and being able to do research and helping people with their questions and just kind of researching the life of Pawnee Bill and May, that's really something that I'm super passionate about. So I get to do something that I love every single day now.
Right. And listen, I kind of feel that. Here at the Chisholm Trail Heritage Center, I just feel like it kind of gets in your blood or something.
It does, yeah.
And I'm also the historical interpreter here, but I like dress up and portray people to part of our education program. And man, I tell people all the time, I have the best job in the world.
Oh yeah. Yeah. People ask us all the time, like, oh, you must love it here. And I'm like, yeah, I really do. So.
Real. I mean, anyway, life in a museum world with just surrounded by the history and so much to learn. It's like there's never ending. I don't know how that happens because history has already happened. It's already passed. Yeah. It seems like there's just always more to learn. And I just love that.
Well, and that's why I tell people when they come here, because, we've been a museum since 1962. And so, my 16 years is a drop in the bucket to, a place like this. And we learn new things all the time. So history is not really something that just stays put. It ebbs and it flows. And with the advent of technology, we're able to find new things and look into new archives and do new research. And so I think it surprises a lot of people when they come back after, 10 or 20 years, and suddenly we have a new bit of research that we didn't know before. And a piece of the tour might have changed, and it's kind of shocking at first, but then we can say, oh, no, like it's actually historically accurate, and this is why. Right. So that's always an interesting part of the job too.
Oh, at 100%. I mean, I think that those things are very, I don't know, it's kind of revealing about how history was recorded,
Mhm.
and then like things just kind of got tucked away or misplaced or overlooked, or like an opinion came in rather than a fact, and or an assumption maybe, and then the deeper dive, you are able to uncover the full truth, and then that's so exciting whenever
Yeah,
you
absolutely. Yeah.
get there. It's just so cool. I feel like we're having like a big history nerd fest myself. So let's talk about the ranch and museum, because I think it's interesting. If you've never heard of Pawnee Bill, or maybe that's all you've heard is Pawnee Bill, then you don't even know this man's real name.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about the museum. Well, I guess like the history, and then maybe we can then talk about what you guys like, what you feel like your mission is now, and kind of a look to the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been around as a ranch since 1903. That was when Pawnee Bill officially founded this place, and we started out as a bison preserve of all things. He was very passionate about bison, and by the time that he started this place, there were less than 1,000 bison that were still roaming the United States. And so to him, having grown up in the 1860s, it was startling because, at that time there were 60 million. So from 60 million to 1,000, that was a big change, especially in the landscape and ecology of the United States. So his real name is Gordon William Lilly, if you don't know who he is. But yeah, so we've been around since 1903. And he wanted this place to be not only his dream home, so that's why he built the house in 1910, which is still here and still full of all of his original furnishings, and built to last the test of time, and how we keep up all the buildings that are still here as well. But he also wanted truly this place to be used by families and to be explored by the people of the United States, because he loved this place so much. And I think to know that it's a museum today, that would have been the icing on the cake to him of all things. So yeah, and so he was added actually to the Oklahoma educational curriculum a few years back. So he is now taught in textbooks. And so we get quite a few third graders up here that come to learn about Pawnee Bill and about Oklahoma history and things like that throughout the school year. So, kind of his mission in life to, educate and outreach and teach people about, a piece of history gone by is still something that we achieve today. And that's, kind of our mission up here, is to educate people about history as it pertains to not only him, but also his wife, a woman named May Lilly, who was an international show woman in her own right, but she was also part owner of this ranch and ranch manager for a majority of her life as well.
So how did he acquire the name Pawnee Bill?
So it was mostly through his associations with the Pawnee Nation. So beginning at the age of 19, he was appointed as the school teacher here at the Pawnee Agency in Oklahoma. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs actually, hired him to work with the nation, and that was through associations he had already had previously with the Pawnee Nation as they were being relocated from Nebraska into Oklahoma. So when he was teaching them, he was very adamant that he wanted them to retain a little bit of their autonomy. So he encouraged them to speak their language and to continue on with different practices like their mythology and their religious practices and things like that, which was unusual for a school teacher, number one.
That's kind of like the not the assimilation
Yeah,
curriculum that you typically hear.
Yeah, so
he-
while he's working there, he's also, learning their language and experiencing, what they have to offer him. And his name being Gordon, that's not really a name that they're used to, so they start calling him Bill from his middle name, which was William. And then when the Buffalo Bill Wild West show starts its first show in 1883, Buffalo Bill was adamant that he wanted a contingent of Sioux and Lakota in the show, as well as a contingent of Pawnee, because those were the two nations that he was used to working with. And the person that they sent with the Pawnee Nation, because they had to have a representative with them to act as interpreter, was Gordon. And so they just started calling him Pawnee Bill at that point. So it was a name bestowed to him as a show name, but it was also kind of given to him by the tribe as well.
So then as I guess the character Pawnee Bill, he performed in a Wild West show, but the Native Americans were also performers in the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So Native Americans would be put into these shows, and the contracts, when you sign contracts with the Wild West show, it usually stipulated that it stipulated different things for different people. So for just everyday individuals, so like the sharpshooters, so say like an Annie Oakley figure, you were expected to do certain things to fulfill your contract. So say you had to be in costume 5 days out of a week, and then you could take 2 days off. For an international performer, you were expected to be in a costume 6 days out of a week, and you could take Sunday off. For Native Americans, they wanted you in costume 7 days a week. They wanted you to be in your regalia all the time. So when the interpreters went with them, it made sense for them to also be dressed as a Native American. So Pawnee Bill would dress as a native, but he also adopted the style of the frontiersman, which was the buckskin suit, which was super popular for Wild West performers at that time. And we have so many buckskin suits in our collection.
Oh, really?
That's what we love to wear. Yeah, they're flashy. They're jackets and pants made out of buckskin, and then the jackets are usually beaded in some kind of elaborate Native American style design. So we have jackets that have Native Americans on horseback. The 50th wedding anniversary suit, which is our most famous one, which is on display as soon as you walk in the door, has flowers all over it and beaded cuffs, and it has the fringe on it. So yeah, that was the style that he adopted. But so yeah, he would have been performing with the natives that he took with him, but he would have also been dressing in a similar style to them as well.
And did they travel internationally? Did this Wild West show?
Yeah, so Buffalo Bill started traveling internationally pretty early on. He would go to England, he would go to Italy, he would go to France. When Pawnee Bill started his own Wild West show, he tried it 1 year, which was 1894, and it was not financially successful. So that was the only year that he really ever went overseas. And May Lilly, his wife and his sharpshooter, didn't enjoy Europe. And so that was really the only year they ever did it. But when the two Bills show combined in 1908, which was when he purchased Buffalo Bill's show, their show did go into Canada. And then the 101 Ranch Wild West show, which was out of Marland, Oklahoma, which is up near Ponca City. The Miller brothers owned that one. They went all the way down into South America. So yeah, Wild West shows were all over the place, not just here in America.
Right. Well, I had done at one time, we taught about Will Rogers, and I would portray Betty.
Yes.
And kind of tell that whole story. And, he left here and went to Argentina and and Australia and traveled all around the world performing. Well, that's what they started calling the Cherokee Kid, in these Wild West shows around the world. And I'm just so intrigued by that. No.
Yeah, so Pawnee Bill actually was in Antwerp at the behest of King Leopold, who was the king of Belgium at that time. And May Lily was the toast of Antwerp. They named drinks after her, and they named flowers after her, and they were just trying to kind of woo them. And she did not like Europe whatsoever. And so we know this because she was writing letters to a friend of hers, and she was just like, I just don't enjoy this. I don't like it here. I'd rather be at home. And so they only ever did the 1 year, and then they just never went back.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Travel in those days was such a big deal.
It was. It took 2 full steamer ships to get the entire show over there. So they sent the bulk of the cast, the animals, all of their wagons on the first ship, and then Pawneeville and May followed with the remainder on the second ship. And they left from the port of Philadelphia to Antwerp. And yeah, they were over there for a couple of months, and it was an undertaking, but they just never went back. So.
That is, sometimes I'm just overwhelmed with the thought of how just the logistics of all of that. It's like Noah's Ark or something, packed up with all these animals. It just seems overwhelming. But you said it wasn't financially successful. The cost of doing all that had to be just crazy expensive.
Yeah, it was astronomical to keep a show running, and more often than not, you operated a show in debt because it was so expensive, because you would spend so much money in the off season trying to print your souvenirs and print your posters and build your wagons and hire your acts, that it usually took a good 6 months of your season out of a 9 to 10 month season just to make some money back. And so it was a pretty dangerous business financially, and it wasn't like you could just go to a bank and say, can you finance me? Because they wouldn't take that kind of a risk. So you were dependent upon sponsorships, you were dependent upon crowds, you were dependent upon your own personal finances. So to keep one of these shows afloat was very difficult. But Pawnee Bill always used to say, if you ran it right, it was your own personal gold mine, because you could just generate so much money out of it. And to run a show independently from 1888 to 1913 and only have really had a few bad seasons, that's pretty amazing in my book.
Right? I can't even imagine. He must have been a real a showman, a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
He must have had all of those skills, that skill set that just really fed into that way of life.
Oh yeah, he loved running the business side of it. That really spoke to him. And in fact, when the merger between the two men happened in 1908, he had purchased the Buffalo Bill Wild West show, and there was a lot of friction that went on between the two casts, because Buffalo Bill's show was used to having Buffalo Bill as the manager, and Pawnee Bill's show was used to having Pawnee Bill as the manager. And Pawnee Bill basically had to have a reckoning with Buffalo Bill's crew and said, I am now your boss, and if you want to stay with the show, you'll listen to me. And the division happened that he would run the business and Buffalo Bill would stay as the entertainment side and the big name that would draw the people in. And after that first kind of friction happened, it smoothed out, and it worked beautifully for the first 4 out of the 5 years of their partnership. Unfortunately, by the 5th year, there was the bankruptcy that kind of ended the show. But yeah, for the first 4 years, it was an excellent venture together.
Yeah. So for you viewers, there is a great podcast called A Very Okay Podcast that the current executive director and the former executive director of the Oklahoma Historical Society, they do this podcast and have different guests. And Anna and her boss are on one of the podcasts. And just in listening to that podcast, kind of prepping for to talk to you today, Anna, I thought it was interesting how during that conversation, like the thing that brought these live Wild West shows kind of to an end was movies.
Mhm.
And talk about that just a little bit, because I think it's nice to kind of put that little string of history together, and why something so great and cool as this live show kind of went to the wayside.
Yeah, so you're kind of talking about something that had been around since 1883, which was the first year for, Wild West shows as we know them, as, these big pageants and arenas. And by 1913, they were having to compete against a lot of different things. You're talking about the advent of film, which was the new and exciting, thing in America. And so it was harder to draw a crowd to something that was less exciting than, say, going to see a movie. And it's interesting to me that movies played a part in the downfall, because Pawnee Bill owned his own movie production company. He loved technology, he loved film, and he was always on the forefront of technology. So he wanted to get in on the new thing that was happening, and that was film. So they were having to compete with that. They were competing with rodeo, which was a direct offshoot of Wild West shows. So, that's something that we think about today, because we still have that. It's rodeo season in Oklahoma. You can start to go see rodeos now. And it's part of our experience here.
Survived.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And yeah.
That's an interesting thing to think about.
And that's probably the closest thing that we have currently that you can compare to a Wild West show is a rodeo, because a lot of these Wild West show performers would later on become rodeo stars in their own right. So especially the females, which really interests me, is the whole history behind female rodeo, because these women were doing the exact same stunts and the exact same tricks that men were doing in the Wild West show arena. So yeah, so rodeo, they were competing with rodeos, they were competing with film, and it was just, how do we keep this thing that's been going on for so long so fresh and exciting? And that was a really difficult thing for them to do. So, that's when Pawnee Bill adds on the Great Far East. And that was this exotic thing that included, the Arab acrobats and the Russian Cossacks, and these things that you couldn't just go see in your hometown. And then they started this thing in 1909 that was Buffalo Bill Says Farewell, because they were going to retire Buffalo Bill, and they kept saying, this is your last chance to see him, you're never going to see him again. And so they were constantly trying to think of the new and exciting things. They added night performances lit by lamps, so you could go see a show at night with electric lamps. So they were constantly trying to think of new and exciting things. But yeah, when films came out, how do you compete with motion picture?
Right.
And that was really one of the difficult things that led to the downfall of the Wild West show.
Yeah. So did they ever it sounds like the Wild West shows were traveling shows. Did they ever just like have them at the ranch?
No, not really until the 1930s. And that would have been during the Old Town era. And Old Town was Pawnee Bill's, I call it his little tourist trap on 64, which is the highway that runs through the ranch today. He built Old Town, which would have housed like his little museum, and it housed a restaurant, and you could buy your gas out there and you could sleep out there. And he had plans to build old towns all across 64, because he was helping to finance and fund US 64. And these were going to be his little, stops along the way. And there was an arena out there where you could go and see a Wild West show. But Wild West shows were meant to move. They were meant to travel along train routes. And so they would travel thousands of miles during a season, unless they had a contract. Now, the 1908 season, just before they brought on Buffalo Bill, Pawnee Bill was performing at an amusement park in New England. So he was able to stay put, and they built a huge backdrop that included like Rocky Mountains and teepees and like a faux fort and a faux log cabin. So if you had a contract like that, you stayed put. But for the most part, they were meant to move and to tour from town to town. And yeah, so they were meant to be put up one day, taken down the next, put up one night, taken down that night, travel to the next city, and do that for 10 months out of a year. So yeah, it was tiring work.
I guess the thing that we can make a reference to today would be like a circus, where they come to a community, put everything up, stay a few days, take it all down and move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best comparison to be made, because we don't have Wild West shows, they've not really been a thing since about 1940, is if you took a rodeo and a circus and kind of combined the two, and that is what a Wild West show would have been, with the canvas and the pageantry, and then you add in, you know, the horse acts with the animals and the cowboys and the cowgirls and things like that. But yeah, there's really nothing to compare to today what a Wild West show, you know, would have been back then.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. So he and May are traveling around with their show and everything. Who's watching the ranch?
So
what's going on at the ranch during that time?
So from 1903 to 1908, it would have been his father who really kind of took care of the property. His father kind of acted as his de facto business manager here in Pawnee. And then in 1908, May Lily retired, and she didn't tour as a sharpshooter any longer, and she basically just took over operations. And she did that until 1913, when finally the show would end and Pawneeville came off the road, and they billed themselves as equal partners after that in the ranch venture. And they were raising their bison. They started raising Scottish Shorthorn cattle here on the property. He actually purchased the main sire from the Prince of Wales's Scottish Shorthorn cattle herd up in Canada, and started this huge cattle venture here in Pawnee. So they had 2,000 acres to do that on. So once they got established here, they built their house in 1910 at a cost of $100,000, which would have been half of what he made from his Wild West show. Settled here, adopted a child in 1917. So they really started to set down roots at this time. But yeah, between like 1903 and 1908, the bison herd that was slowly starting to be put here would have been overseen by his father.
So that's close to about the same period of time that like the US was splitting up these bison herds and putting them, like there's one down here at the Wichita Mountain Wildlife.
Yes, yeah. In fact, Pawneeville had a hand in helping to start that one. So
okay. But his was a private herd. It was not a part of what the US government was trying to do to replenish the population of the bison.
No, he was purchasing from private individuals. So he would buy, as he toured around, he would purchase here and there from, like, say, a zoo. So he would buy from a zoo, or he would buy from a private individual, like at a farm. So like we have constant reference to some of his business ventures off of the Wild West show to say, like, we went and saw a bison herd today and we bought one bison. So they were picking up little bits here and there as they traveled. So having them in the show was important to him, because he wanted to show people, like, these are American bison. Right. But also starting to collect them for his own ranch was also important. And then he started his actual cultivation of them around that same time too.
Well, I mean, a very small herd on a private ranch, you do have to have several other bloodlines to introduce.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
So
to grow a herd. So that was, I mean, what a forward thinking man.
yeah.
I mean, it's like he could just, I guess he was just intuitive to what things were coming down the road or something. I don't know, but he seems to be just really aware of ways that he can do, I don't know, take part in the changes that are coming.
Yeah, and like I said, he loved anything that was technological. So he always owned vehicles. Like he had the first car in Pawnee County. It was a Buick. He owned it in 1910. And he always had the newest model of a car. He had Victrolas. He had radios. Anything that was technologically advanced. So then that also translated into when the highway systems were coming along. There's this man named Jack DeLiesel who was kind of barnstorming around the state of Oklahoma representing the U.S. Highway Association, and he was meeting with all these chamber of commerce around the state, and he met up with Pawnee Bill and said, "You want to lease me your name? I'll put it on 64." And so Pawnee Bill said, "Sure, I'll sell you my name for $100." So Pawnee Bill made some money doing it, but then he got really passionate about it. So then he starts representing US 64, which again is the road that runs through our ranch and through Pawnee at national conventions. So he kind of switches the mindset from the old west to the new west. And I always tell people when they come here to visit, if you only know Pawnee Bill for Wild West shows, that he'd be so happy with that, because that was his greatest love of his entire life. But he did so many other things outside of the Wild West shows that it's kind of hard to sit down with only 30 minutes that you have a tourist to tell them like all the wonderful things that he did for not only the state of Oklahoma but also the United States history as well.
Oh, exactly, man. I'm just so impressed. I just love to hear stories about people like Pawnee Bill. He was a teacher and obviously very passionate about the Pawnee people. But then he was a businessman and a performer and an investor and just a rancher.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, just so many things. What a great guy. Those are the kind of people that I think, man, I would have liked to have had a conversation with him and just picked his brain a little bit. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about the other day, is not only him but also May Lily. Is I wish I could have an afternoon alone with her, because she is an amazing individual, and I can't imagine all the things that went on in her mind to be able to do the things that she did at the turn of the century as a female in America, because you're talking about a time before she had the right to vote, a time before we really understood the division of property between spouses and things like that. So yeah, I mean, to be an owner in this property, to have done all the things that she did in civic organizations, to have toured the world as a sharpshooter, that's so amazing to me.
Oh, right. Wow. What a great example she is, of just a woman being herself.
Yeah.
Finding success in that, despite things that were in a lot of ways, trying to hold her back. And just really doing her thing, and just that's really something. So if I come to the Pawnee Bill Ranch and Museum, kind of give our viewers an idea of what would my day be like.
Yeah, so we still have 500 of the original 2,000 acres that Pawneeville owned, and we're still a working ranch. We still breed bison here on the property, so you can come and see our bison herd. We no longer breed Scottish Shorthorns. We have Texas Longhorns today, and then we also have a small group of Clydesdales that live here on the property. We use them in our annual Wild West show to pull our wagons and things like that. So you can come see our livestock when you come here. We have all of our historic buildings that were built during Pawneeville's time. So the 1910 mansion is still set up just like it was when he lived here. It looks like he just walked out of the house full of all of his possessions. The house is, I would say, probably about 98% original on the inside. Knickknacks, wall coverings, everything was his. So it's truly amazing. We have the carriage house, the blacksmith shop, the cabin, the barn, the observation tower, all of that's open to go through. And then we have our museum that was built in 1970 for the housing of the main collection. And it actually just finished being renovated, the main gallery. So when you come in, you can see a lot of the things that pertain to things that we've talked about today. So like Wild West show artifacts, but also things like US 64, the bison conservation, the house itself. And then people who worked here, like Jose Barrera, Mexican Joe, who was Pawneeville's best friend. We have a collection that's dedicated to him. Our diorama was just renovated, so you can come in and see the whole scope of what a Wild West show would have looked like when it was set up with all the tents and the crowds and everything. And it has a touch screen that'll show you photographs and actual video shot in like 1910 of the show being performed. And so yeah, that's kind of what we have up here. Like I said, it's a lot more than what people expect.
Right, my goodness, it sounds like. So like about how much time would people spend there?
We usually tell people to put about an hour and a half to 2 hours into their day up here, because our tour through the mansion takes about 30 to 45 minutes. And then we do have quite a bit to read up here. So there is all that. And then to see the animals, so about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then if you come on a special event, like we have stuff that goes on year round. Our quilt show is coming up in October. We do a scary stories event where we lead people around and tell them true, spooky stories of the state of Oklahoma sometime in October. We have our Christmas event in December. And then like our Wild West show is of course our biggest event. We do a reenactment of Pawneeville's Wild West show, usually the second weekend in June. So if you come for those of course like all day kind of events, but yeah, usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours is what we tell people when you come up here. And then of course go and experience downtown Pawnee. The town itself still looks like it did when it was founded back in 1893 with the original buildings. We have a famous steakhouse here in town called Click's Steakhouse, so you can go eat a steak. And then right now the bathhouse is open, which is a WPA project built back in the 1930s, and it's connected to the lakes. You can go swimming out there. So that's where everybody is right now, actually. So.
Wow, that is so cool. I just love it that our state has so many really great opportunities for people.
Yeah.
So the Wild West show, where do you find performers to do the things that happen at a Wild West show?
So most of our performers are volunteers from the local community. They're real life cowboys and cowgirls who they make up the bulk of our Jill team. Our Pawnee Bill is actually our head of maintenance here. His name's Kevin. And our May Lily is his wife, actually. Her name is Dr. Elise Webb. She actually teaches at NOC here in Northern Oklahoma. And then we contract out some of the specialty acts, like the Roman riding and the more risky acts, I guess you would say. We contract those out to some rodeo performers, but we try to do it justice. We pick and choose some of the more exciting acts. So we always call it like the best of series for a Pawneeville show, but we actually take the programs and we find the people who can do those acts. And it usually takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do a full show. And then we set off fireworks at the end to give everybody a big, send off and farewell. But it's definitely our most popular event. We see a few thousand people on the 2 days of the show. So it's always a lot of fun. We've been doing it since 1988, which was the 100th anniversary of the start of Pawnee Bill show.
Wow, how fun. That sounds very fun. So I think on the podcast, I heard something about a cannon.
Yeah.
Just last weekend?
It was on July 2nd. Yes.
Okay. Well, tell us about that.
So Pawnee Bill always announced the start of his shows with a cannon blast. And it's not really a cannon. People have been getting on our case about that. It's a 3-inch ordnance rifle, but
okay.
It's easier to say a cannon. So yeah, so he would always announce the start of his show with a cannon because, of course, it makes a loud noise and it draws a crowd.
Right.
And so he purchased a cannon from the New Jersey militia as surplus. It was military surplus. And this cannon saw action at the Battle of Missionary Ridge in 1863. So it was actually in the Civil War, and it was founded in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia, which is May Lily's hometown. So it has all of these connections to, the Lilly family. But it was used in the Wild West show. And when the show ended, he parked it on his front lawn here at the ranch. And there it sat from 1913 until 1942. And when Pawnee Bill was getting elderly, probably never in his wildest dreams did he ever think there'd be a museum like this that was here. And so he started giving away a lot of his possessions. So he would say, here's May's saddle, take it. Here's this piece, take it. Well, he gave this cannon to a former business associate named Frank Stewart. And Frank took it to Oklahoma City and put it in his backyard. And it was down there for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And then Frank passed away and gave it to the state of Oklahoma, to the Oklahoma Historical Society. Well, this was before we were ever owned by them. And it used to sit down on the lawn of the Wiley Post building, which was where the original Historical Society was. And then that is now, we now have a new facility down there built in 2005, and it got moved to that. And then our ranch, which was purchased by the Historical Society in 1990, but it has sat down there ever since. And when we got our new director, it was just kind of this conversation of, why is the cannon down there and not up here? And so after 80 years, it came back home. And so July 2nd, which was last weekend, we had our big dedication ceremony. We built a brand new plaza for it, but it's back now. It's back on the lawn where Pawnee Bill had it. The lieutenant governor was here. Our state representatives were here, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a big crowd here. We fired off a replica cannon. Of course, you can't fire that cannon anymore, but we fired off a replica cannon, and yeah, it was a lot of fun because it's been about 80 years in the making to get it back, but it is now back permanently. It's not going to go anywhere. We're not going to give it to anybody else. It's going to stay here forever. So
I thought that was a great little bit of information that people should hear about. That's so cool. So one other question, the house, did he just, I guess, was he living in that home when he passed away? And then they didn't have anyone to leave that to, or?
Yeah, so Pawnee Bill and May were two people who loved children. They both came from really large families. Pawnee Bill was the eldest of 4. May Lily was the middle of 8. So, lots of family. And unfortunately, they just didn't have children that outlived them. They had a biological child who passed away in infancy. And then they had 2 adopted children, one who died in infancy and then one who died at the age of 8. His name was Billy. And he's the one that when you come here, you'll see all of his things still here at the ranch. So when Pawnee Bill died in 1942, he had originally wanted the property to go to the Boy Scouts of America. He loved the Boy Scouts mission, and he wanted this place to be used and enjoyed, like I said, by families and by children. That was what his main mission was. So unfortunately, the Boy Scouts had just purchased the Philmont out in New Mexico. And so they just didn't have the money to upkeep it in the manner that the will had dictated. So it went back to his family, and his sister named Effie Judy. Everybody here in town remembers Mrs. Judy. She lived in the house from 1942 to 1958 when she passed away, and she kind of just treated it as an unofficial museum. She kept it as it was. She would host religious camps in the house. She was a very devout Baptist, and so lots of women's camps and Bible camps and things like that were happening in the house at that time. But then she passes away in 58, and it goes to her son, so Pawnee Bill's nephew. And in 1962, he and his second wife just kind of decide, why don't we just give it to the state? And so in 1962, they brokered a deal to sell it to the state of Oklahoma. So in 1962, we officially became a state historic site. So we've only ever been owned by the Lillies or by the state of Oklahoma. And that's kind of fortunate for us because everything remained intact and everything is still in pristine condition. And we're a very unique museum because of that.
Right. Well, it sounds like maybe he wasn't the only one in his family who was kind of forward thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Like figured out too. And his nephew, that's really unheard of. Usually if someone else can't afford it and they sell things off or give things away, or it just goes to disrepair. And so, wow, that is amazing that it stayed in the family and intact like that.
Yeah, his two sisters, like I said, he was the eldest of four children. He didn't have the best relationship with his brother, but he adored his two sisters, and they protected him and his legacy when he was still alive, and that just kind of continued on into death. And so they did so much for him after he passed away, and helped to write. There's only been one biography written about him, and that was written in the 50s, and they helped the biographer, who's a Stillwater author named Glenn Shirley, to write the biography. So if it weren't for Mrs. Judy and Mrs. Green, we probably wouldn't know as much about Pawnee Bill as we do today. And it's all thanks to his two sisters.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. What a great family story, Oklahoma family story. And just kind of real quick for the viewers, we were talking earlier. So the state of Oklahoma, the legislators were able to give a large amount of money to the Oklahoma Historical Society. Is that correct? And
yes.
So the Pawnee Bill Ranch and Museum is going to receive a nice bit of that for you guys to do some things there. So kind of tell us, what kind of things are going to be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recently received a bond from the state of Oklahoma, and it's about $47 million, and that's going to be spread all throughout the agency. We have about 26 sites, which the agency cares for, and we're all over the state. It's not just, Oklahoma City, it's everywhere. We go all the way up to Tahlequah, all the way down to the Red River, and then all points in between. So this site will receive between 4 and 5 million of that, and it's going to go towards deferred maintenance that has happened over the past 10 to 12 years due to economic downturns and recessions and things like that. But we're going to see a lot of construction happening. So brand new parking lots, brand new bison trails through our pasture. The exterior of our buildings will be repaired, and that will match the work that's been done already to the interior of our house. We had some earthquake damage back in 2016 that was repaired over the past few years. And then just some other miscellaneous work. I've heard that our galleries are going to be redone too, and then more updating to help our buildings become ADA compliant, because, you know, building built in 1970 needs some help with that. So yeah.
For sure. Well, I think that is really important information for the viewers to know, that when money is given through a bond like that, it's typically earmarked for certain things, and you guys have tangible, you know, there will be tangible results from that investment. And I love that, and I love for us, for Oklahomans, to be able to see where did this money go? What is this, you know, what is this really doing? And it's preserving our state's history in this instance, you know. And
yeah, we are so excited across the agency, because this has been a long time in coming, not just here, but just, you know, across the board. And you can kind of see some, if you go to our social media accounts like Facebook or Instagram, the state has instituted the Oklahoma Heritage Preservation Grant, which is through the Oklahoma Historical Society. And that's allowed us to do some work through grants, and that's helped us to renovate our main gallery. So you can see kind of some of the work that we've already started doing, and this bond will help us to continue that work. So if you want to see, you know, how far we've already come with a little bit of money and how far we're going to go, you can definitely see the progression of that on our Facebook page.
right. Well, Anna, I'm so excited to talk to you today. So if people wanted to come to see the Pawnee Bill Ranch and Museum, what are the hours, and like, what is the cost to come to there?
Yeah, so currently we're open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then on Sundays from 1 to 4. We're closed any state holiday. So if you're unsure if it's a state holiday or not, just give us a call at 918-762-2513. It costs $7 for adults, $5 for senior citizens, and $4 for children. We do give discounts to military, and then we also have a family discount. So if you have a large, you know, if you have a group of people coming with you, give us a call, because we can definitely, you know, accommodate that as well. And then we see school groups year round. We offer special activities for them as well. So if you have a homeschool group, a church group, a senior group, we have a Pontiac club coming next week. So yeah, so if you have any kind of group, we do offer special rates for them, as well as special activities for, you know, larger groups as well. So definitely give us a call. You can also contact us through Facebook, and we set up any groups at any time as well.
Okay, well, we are going to put your website information as well as your Facebook page in the comments section on this post. And again, Anna, thank you so much for being on today. Viewers, if you want to know even more about Pawnee Bill and his wife, May Lily, listen to a Very Okay podcast. There's a great interview with Anna and her boss, and it's an even deeper dive into their lives and gives even more detail than she shared today. So I think you'd find it very interesting. So when we sign off, we always say happy trails. So Anna, thank you. It was a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah. And hey, I hope your Let's Talk About It is a great success.
Yes, we started ours on July 16th. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we're going to have a lot of people show up for it.
Ours starts on Monday, July the 11th. So we're very excited about it too. So anyone else who's watching, if you want to unmute and say happy trails with us, we would welcome that. I see one. Oh, they just decided to leave instead of say happy trails. Okay. Well, until next time.
Happy trails.
Happy trails.
Thank you.